unavoidability of metaphysics, even though it should read the ineliminability of metaphysics, I think. But I'll get to that by the end of the presentation. So first of all, I started all this program by thinking about the definition of metaphysics. So how should we define it? And I went to look in the various textbooks how it is defined in there. And there are different ways one can define metaphysics. So different answers have been offered on the question of what metaphysics is. Some go by just enumerating what metaphysics is not. This is one approach. Then there is this etymological definition that doesn't say much. Then some will say that it is a discipline that should offer us a conceptual analysis of terms like existence, causation, substance, space, and so on, the terms that we use within metaphysics. Then a lot of people use a definition by example approach. So you have just the examples of various topics that metaphysics deals with. And then there is the big picture approach, which I will be talking about today. So there are a couple of ways one can talk about the big picture approach and how can define metaphysics in that way. Van Wagen will say that metaphysics is the study of ultimate reality in his metaphysics textbook. Karl Marcosian, in their introduction to metaphysics, will say that this is the branch of philosophy concerned with the fundamental questions about the nature of reality. But curiously, they will discard this definition and go on to use a definition by example. And then there is the third one that I will use today, that metaphysics is a systematic study of the most fundamental structure of reality. So these three definitions of metaphysics, what have in common? So what is postulated within these definitions? So first of all, the existence of a reality. They talk about reality, about the ultimate reality, the fundamental structure of reality, and so on. And this reality is fundamental in some way. So if it is fundamental, then it is irreducible. So and it constitutes metaphysics, then we are talking about the irreducibility of metaphysics. Then, if it is fundamental, then also we are talking about the universality of its subject matter and scope. And if it is universal, then it can be used and applied in various different disciplines that usually we talk about. And so it can be used as a theoretical backdrop from them for what? Usually for a measure of consistency. And this all can lead, and I think leads, at least according to Low's argument, to the unavoidability and ineliminability of metaphysics. So I will talk about Low's definition, actually about his a couple of arguments that he adopts in his book, Survey of Metaphysics. This is this one. And I'll start from there, and then I'll add some stuff that I think may be interesting or not. So the big picture approach, why should a big picture approach be endorsed at all? So because of the need of a forum for boundary disputes. So Low will say, and I quote him here, one of the roles of metaphysics as an intellectual discipline is to provide a forum in which boundary disputes between other disciplines can be conducted. For instance, the dispute as to whether the subject matter of a special science, such as biology or psychology or economics, can properly be said to be subsumed under that of another, allegedly more fundamental science, such as physics. Metaphysics cannot occupy the interdisciplinary role just described because its central concern is with the fundamental structure of reality as a whole. So basically what we need some place where we can discuss the relation between different sciences. So, but not only the relation, also the disputes between them. So metaphysics, and Low will continue to say, metaphysics as traditionally conceived is very arguably and ineliminable and conceptually necessary as the intellectual backdrop for every other discipline. Why? Ultimately, because truth is single and indivisible, or to put it another way, the world or reality as a whole is unitary and necessarily self-consistent. The invisibility of truth means that all of these forms of inquiry, history, for example, must, if they are to succeed in their aim, acknowledge the need to be consistent with each other. Consistency can only be provided by the practitioners of an intellectual discipline which aspires to complete universality in its subject matter and aims. And the discipline is metaphysics, as traditionally conceived. So that's what law says about that. And basically, there is a problem about this boundary dispute. So everything relies on it. So the argument rests on the idea that boundary disputes between different disciplines cannot be resolved from the standpoint of a particular discipline. Why? It's very simple, because all particular disciplines are pursuing truth using their own specific truth-seeking methods, and because of that, these disciplines may not act as a guarantee of mutual consistency. So they just see things from their own standpoint. Therefore, we need something, we need to measure this mutual consistency, and we need some kind of truth-checking arena. And which discipline can guarantee such a truth-checking arena? Well, only a discipline that presupposes a universal subject matter, the indivisibility of truth. And which discipline presupposes such a thing? Metaphysics. So perhaps the indispensability of metaphysics, this argument may be reconstructed in this way. So to resolve boundary disputes between different disciplines, a form that provides mutual consistency is needed. Mutual consistency can be achieved only within a forum that aspires to complete universality in subject matter and aims. Metaphysics presents itself as such a forum. Therefore, metaphysics is indispensable for the resolution of boundary disputes. And this is how Lowell's argument starts. Then he goes on further. So he questions whether we are justified in accepting such an idea. So he will not use this argument. This is he doesn't specify his argument in this way. I tried to reconstruct him, and perhaps I added a bit more, but I think that's more or less what he's saying. But then another step comes in, and the step is the step of questioning the metaphysics role in whether it can resolve such boundary disputes. And the thing is that numerous attempts have been put forward. A lot of people doubt the idea that metaphysics can assume such a role. But the curious thing, what Lowe will say, that his attempts only, and I quote him, strengthen the claims of metaphysics to be an autonomous and indispensable form of rational inquiry. Because the point is that absolutely everything, including even the status and credentials of metaphysics itself, comes within the purview of the universal discipline which metaphysics claims to be. And then he examines several arguments from several criticisms, and he starts with the threat of relativism. So relativism can come in many different forms. We can have cultural, anthropological, historical, scientific, or whatever else, or different instance of relativism. But the basic idea that it denies the thesis of a single and indivisible truth. And it maintains the idea that what is true for one, for example, culture or scientific epoch, or historical epoch, may not be true for another. And that different cultures and epochs have different and, what is important, incommensurable conceptions of reason and rationality. And this is a quote from another book of B.J. Lowe, The Possibility of Metaphysics. So, and this is just an illustration of the threat of relativism. It is funny, that's why I did it, I like it. So bear with me, sorry for that. So metaphysics is not possible because metaphysics is the misbegotten product of Western intellectual hubris, the mistaken search for a non-existent objective and total truth, guided by the supposedly timeless and universal principles of logic. Truth and reason, according to this view, are culture-bound concept of strictly limited utility. The notion that there could be a fundamental structure of reality for us to discern is deemed absurd and paradoxical, because what we call reality is supposedly always just a human construction saturated by interest-driven interpretation. So that is the that any relativism will put forward, or almost any. So what's Low's reply? How does he reply to the threat of relativism? He will say the threat of relativism is a metaphysical thesis, and these are his words. But of course, such a doctrine is itself a metaphysical thesis, in the sense of metaphysics that I have been expounding and trying to defend. For it is nothing less than a claim about the fundamental nature of reality, which could not be substantiated solely by the methods of any special science or intellectual discipline, such as anthropology or history of sociology. The practitioners of any such discipline must acknowledge that what they are advocating is precisely a metaphysical thesis. The emphasis is mine, because this is one which transcends boundaries of any more limited form of rational inquiry. So basically what he says, we're dealing with a metaphysical thesis, we're dealing with a metaphysical claim, and it will be important for him. Why? Because at the end, the threat of relativism will be self-defeating. So, and these are his words. The attempt to undermine or eliminate the metaphysical dimension of our thinking is self-defeating, because the very attempt necessarily constitutes a piece of metaphysical thinking itself. And he goes on further. He criticizes Kant in the same manner. So he says, here's what Kant thinks. Kant will say metaphysical claims concern not the fundamental structure of a mind-independent reality, even if such reality exists, but rather the fundamental structure of rational thought about reality. Therefore, a metaphysics that would deal with the fundamental structure of reality is impossible. And Low offers two replies, and I would like to stress them out because they're different in character. So the first one is an argument that basically is a critique of the content of Kant's theory. So we'll say, if nothing about the structure of mind-independent reality is accessible to us, then by the same token, nothing about the structure of our own thought is accessible to us either. So this is one way to criticize Kant. Another way to criticize Kant, and the way which I prefer and I will endorse throughout this presentation, is the idea that the Kant threat is self-defeating. So how it goes, it has a first step. It has a step in which the emphasis is put on the form, on the metaphysical dimension of Kant's argument, and then it has a second step in which it is shown that the Kant's argument is self-defeating. So how it works, what Low says about it, once again, we can see how metaphysics, as traditionally conceived, is inescapable for any rational thinker. The Kantian attempt to avoid metaphysics in this sense by restricting our critical concerns purely to the contents of our thoughts appears doomed to failure. Questions to do with the content themselves have inescapably a genuinely metaphysical dimension. That is a dimension which does not have solely to do with the content of thoughts about content. And he goes on. Notice here, first of all, that the very assertion that it would not be possible to have a certain knowledge of metaphysical truths, if metaphysical truths concern mind-independent reality, is itself a metaphysical claim in the traditional sense of metaphysics. This in itself shows once more the self-defeating nature of Kant's attempt at redefinition. And in the same way, he'll treat the threat of naturalized epistemology. So he will claim that not only the relativist threat is self-defeating, he will claim that Kant's threat is self-defeating as well as the threat of naturalist epistemology. And the idea is the same. Basically what he says, it has to be recognized that the very debate that I'm now conducting with the advocate of naturalized epistemology is one which itself necessarily rests upon certain metaphysical assumptions, some of which are shared and some of which are disputed. In short, the very doctrine of naturalist epistemology and the kinds of arguments that are invoked in its support have a metaphysical dimension to them, which is at odds with the central claims of that doctrine. So, what is Law suggesting? He's suggesting that the arguments which claim that we should eliminate metaphysics ultimately do the opposite. They end up strengthening our belief in metaphysics, and at the end they render it ineliminable. How so? Well, because these various critics of metaphysics are themselves metaphysical assertions. They involve some kind of metaphysical content, the content that I stressed before, various theses, various claims, various assumptions, or simply they have some kind of metaphysical dimension. And what is needed to eliminate metaphysics? The idea is that one should offer an argument whose content isn't metaphysical. Otherwise, it is impossible to eliminate metaphysics. So, how such an argument for the ineliminability of metaphysics would go? Here it is. So, to eliminate metaphysics, one should offer an argument whose content isn't metaphysical, but any argument that criticizes metaphysics presents itself as having a metaphysical content. Therefore, it is impossible to offer an argument outside metaphysics scope. Therefore, it is impossible to eliminate metaphysics. And so we can say metaphysics is ineliminable. So, one question may be posed: what is the role of the fundamental structure of reality? What does it have to do with this argument of that claims that metaphysics is ineliminable? Well, Law would say that the argumentation against the threat of relativism does not rely on the fundamental structure of reality. So, and this is a quote from him: the attempt to eliminate metaphysics shows that the argument from the indivisibility of truth is not absolutely essential for the defense of metaphysics, in the sense that metaphysics would be left completely without justification in its absence, which once again should not surprise us, because everything, including even the question of whether truth is indivisible, is potentially open to metaphysical inquiry. So everything can be put under a metaphysical inquiry. But it seems that the fundamental structure of reality does play a role in the argument of metaphysics in eliminability. So, what is the importance of the fundamental structure of reality? First of all, the argument of which I spoke before, the indispensability argument, is grounded on it, as we saw. And secondly, the criticisms revolving around the fundamental structure of reality seems to put forward the idea that we should accept the second argument, the argument for the ineliminability of metaphysics. So, why so? Because the fundamental structure of reality, the indivisibility of truth, is important. Is important in which way? Because we're using it while we are practicing metaphysics. So, without a positive formulation or an attempt at a formulation, or without a possibility of its formulation, criticism of it would be unavailable. So we cannot formulate a criticism without having before some kind of positive formulation of what fundamental structure of reality is. And curiously, what the criticism do, the criticism just reinforce the idea that metaphysics is ineliminable. And so, what can we say? We can say that metaphysics is indispensable, ineliminable, and unavoidable. How it goes, we could say something like this: metaphysics is immune to rejection and presents itself as an intellectual prerequisite for natural sciences and any other discipline. This is the idea of which I spoke before, that we need an arena in which various disciplines will resolve the boundary issues. So it does not have a restricted domain, metaphysics, as natural sciences do. It explores not only what is actual, but also is interested in what might be possible. And furthermore, as all other disciplines rest on some metaphysical presuppositions, all boundary disputes between these disciplines will have a metaphysical dimension, and therefore metaphysics may be regarded as an indispensable forum within which these disputes take place. Therefore, metaphysics is indispensable, ineliminable, and unavoidable. So this is more or less Low's idea. He presents it in like 10 pages, something like that. But is this all? And there is a problem with Carnap. Seems so, at least. So it seems that Carnap's critique of metaphysics might not be affected by Low's argumentation. So it seems that he might be outside of the scope offered by Low's argumentation. Why is it so? It seems that all the work in Low's argumentation is being done not by affirming that one line of reasoning is self-defeating, but rather by claiming that what is being said is a metaphysical assertion. So in order to reject Low's argumentation, it is essential to establish that the criticism put against metaphysics does not involve a metaphysical assertion. We need to formulate a criticism without having metaphysical assertions. And it seems, it may be, that Carnap is offering such an argument. So what is Carnap offering? He's famously offering his theory of linguistic frameworks. What is a linguistic framework? A linguistic framework is a framework in which we have a list of expression for a language and some synthetic rules, how to use that language. These rules allow us to evaluate whether or not a given sentence in this language is true or false. So for example, we can have, and he mentions, for example, the thing language. There we can say, we can use expressions like things and so on. We could have some rules. Same goes, for example, the number language. We can postulate the number language. We can postulate the existence of numbers. These are the expressions that we use in that language. And there are some rules on how these numbers are work. And what is the next thing that we can do? We can ask some questions. For example, we can ask a question whether there is a bottle on my table. And in the thing language, that question is an internal question that it has some meaning, and it can be true or false depending on whether there is something on my table or not. But a question about the existence of things, like a question that a realist would give a positive answer, for Carnap is meaningless. Why it is meaningless? Because it is put outside the linguistic framework. It simply does not offer an answer within it. If it does not offer an answer within it, then the question is meaningful, is devoid of cognitive content. So what can we have? We can pose ontological questions. We can do ontology, but the questions that we put forward will be either trivially true or meaningless. If we are dealing with our, for example, linguistic framework of numbers, we can ask whether there are numbers, and if this question is an internal question, then this question will be meaningful but trivially true, because we stipulated that the linguistic framework uses these expressions, the numbers, and therefore we're just simply reaffirming what was stipulated at the beginning. On the other hand, if we ask an existence questions, whether the numbers per se exist as something outside the linguistic framework, then we're posing a question that cannot be addressed, that cannot be meaningfully replied to. This is more or less Carnap's framework, Carnap's idea of linguistic frameworks. So how can one answer it? So there is a hasty reply to Carnap's criticism. So we could say the Carnap threat is self-defeating in the same manner as the other threats were self-defeating. So Carnap's thesis that no assertion may be formulated outside of a linguistic framework is itself an assertion. To be more precise, metaphysical assertion. Therefore, what was said against the threat of relativism may be applied to Carnap's threat as well. So this is the idea that Low put forward when dealing with relativism. the attempt to undermine or eliminate the metaphysical dimension of our thinking is self-defeating because the very attempt necessarily constitutes a piece of metaphysical thinking itself. So this is one thing that one could say for Carnap as well. But what could defend Carnap by saying, well, look, Carnap's linguistic frame thesis does not represent a metaphysical assertion. So we're not dealing with a metaphysical assertion, but rather a semantic interpretation. Carnap himself would say, this is my semantic method. So according to Carnap, we're not dealing with metaphysical questions. What he is offering is a semantical analysis of our language and how we use it. So, and moreover, when the question of which linguistic framework should we adopt is raised, he has an answer to that. And the answer is that the choice of which linguistic framework should we adopt is guided by pragmatic reasons. And here's a quote from him that is important that can be used to reject the quick reply that I gave before. So what does he say? An alleged statement of the reality of a system of entities is a pseudo statement without cognitive content. To be sure, we have to face at this point an important question, but it is a practical, not a theoretical question. It is a question of whether or not to accept new linguistic forms. The acceptance cannot be judged as being either true or false because it is not an assertion. So if we want to say that Carnap thesis is an assertion, a metaphysical assertion, then Carnap himself basically is offering us an answer that he is not dealing with metaphysical assertions. Okay, so what then? What can then we do? There are several ways one could go. So what is important that we should not talking about an assertion, then the argument for the ineliminability of metaphysics fails. And so we should discard Carnap's position. We can do it how? By offering various standard manners that focus on the content of Carnap's argumentation, on Carnap's theory. So Quine famously attacked Carnap by saying that the distinction between internal and external question relies on the analytic synthetic distinction, and Quine rejects the analytic synthetic distinction. Therefore, we should reject the difference between internal and external questions. Therefore, the whole idea collapses. This is one way to go. Another way would be the idea that Susan Heck offers. She says that, for example, what does it mean to be real? To be real means to be an element of a framework. So, and what is important, this cannot be applied to the framework itself. So we cannot question whether the framework can be real. But she says, but perhaps we can formulate the thesis of reality by adopting another language, a meta language, in which we will discuss about linguistic frameworks as being real or not. So this is something that Carnap does not permit, but it's a legit possibility. David and Sterleni have another idea. They have this idea of going of criticizing the positivist stance because they think that there is such thing as the given. What is the given? The given is something that we acquired with our, let's say, direct contact with the world. That's what the protocol sentences of the positivists talk about. And he will then, David, and Sterleni, they will then accuse the positives of being closet anti-realists who offer an a priori theory of language, which is not far from the truth, but at least I'm thinking so. And but what is important, the idea is simply that we start with reality. We should start with metaphysics, and then later language should come. So this is one way to go. A fourth way to go, one that Lowe mentions when discussing a semantic criticism, but Lowe does not talk about Carnap in his book. So what does he say? He says, in general, that when a criticism that is raised from this linguistic standpoint, that we can criticize this linguistic standpoint in the same way that we criticize Kant, by saying simply that we cannot access this the language per se if we cannot access reality. So these are all valid attempts, good attempts, but they are all focusing on the content of Carnap's argumentation. Is it a way, perhaps, and this is what I would like to try to do, is to offer another argument that is formatted in the spirit of the indispensability, ineliminability argumentation that was being offered before. So how could we formulate that? And here I'm using Van Frassen's distinction between science as activity and science as a product. So here's a quote from Van Frassen. He says, the word science displays a typical ambiguity between activity and product. We say that science tells us that smoking is unhealthy. This refers to the product, findings, well-confirmed theories accepted in the scientific community. We also say that science investigates such structures as links between smoking and health, or between background radiation and the history of the universe. Here we refer to the activity in which science are engaged. So the question is, could we use this in metaphysics? And Jaksland, a Danish philosopher, actually thinks that metaphysics shares this ambiguity with the term science, the same ambiguity that science has. So metaphysics refers both to the activity conducted by the metaphysicist and to the product of this activity. But he doesn't argue much. He doesn't argue much about this. So a question that be said: what do we think? What could metaphysics as activity be, and what could metaphysics as a product be? What do we intend by that? So, what do we intend by metaphysical product? Well, we're thinking about metaphysical theories about the fundamental structure of reality, idealism, realism, and so on. The content of such product is debatable, avoidable, contingent. We can talk about this, so we can discuss it, we can criticize it, and we do. And it seems that Lowe thinks the same when we're talking about the relation between possibility and experience. I hope, and this is a quote from him, I hold that metaphysics by itself only tells us what there could be. But given that metaphysics told us this, experience can then tell us which of the various alternative metaphysical possibilities is plausible true in actuality. On the other hand, what do we intend by metaphysical activity? So it's kind of hard to say, but there will be some kind of metaphysical investigation, inquiry, formulation of criticism, simply doing metaphysics. Showing of structures is one way to think about it. So all that activity that we actually do know, we engage with one another and discuss metaphysics. So, and with this line of thought, perhaps we can revise the ineliminability argument offered before. So the first argument was based on content. It spoke about content, about assertions, about theories. So if we try to formulate it in another way, perhaps it will help us to overcome Carnap's criticism. And this is a different formulation of the argument. So the argument could go: to eliminate metaphysics, one should offer an argument that does not involve metaphysical activity, but any argument that criticizes metaphysics presents itself as involving metaphysical activity. Therefore, it is impossible to offer an argument that does not present itself as metaphysical activity. Therefore, it is impossible to eliminate metaphysics. Hence, metaphysics is ineliminable. And does this help us? Yes, it does. It seems so. So According to Carnap, metaphysics should be eliminated since statements about reality cannot be made as they end up being pseudo-statements. But Carnap's argument is not a metaphysical assertion. It is offered as a, I used perhaps wrongly the term semantical generalization, perhaps a semantical statement, I don't know. A guideline, but it's not a metaphysical statement, that's what is important. A guideline on how language should be used. So, and these semantical generalizations, statement may lack metaphysical content, but they do present themselves as a form of metaphysical activity. If that is true, then Carnap argument may be refuted using the revised eliminability argument that simply claims that any argument that criticizes metaphysics, it presents itself as involving a metaphysical activity, and that is impossible to eliminate metaphysics in this way. So it might be strange to talk of metaphysics in this way. It might seem that such an argument is uninformative, shallow, or even circular, because we are justifying metaphysics, or to be more precise, we are defending metaphysics by appealing to metaphysics, and we should reject it because of that. But perhaps another thing could be said. All that has been said is correct, but this is so because there is nothing else to be said. What we're dealing with is something fundamental. There is nothing much else we can say. We're dealing with the brute fact. So, and we just must bear in mind that metaphysical activity is not about the content of reality or the content of metaphysical claims. It is about the act of showing, scrutinizing, assuming, criticizing, and so on. So we cannot further investigate, analyze the fact that that specific act is metaphysical. Simply, there is nothing else to be said. So the question is then, why should we adopt such a distinction? Why should we engage? So why should we use the distinction between metaphysics as practice and as activity and metaphysics as product? So one thing that links up with what Boran said before, it seems that we engage in metaphysical activity on a daily basis. So, and this is also what law says. Precisely because metaphysics is a universal intellectual discipline, it is one which no rational being can avoid engaging in at least some of the time. We are all metaphysicians, whether we like it or not, and whether we know it or not. Or another reason for which we should adopt it is perhaps we could get a better grasp of some metaphysical systems that rely on the notion of showing, without accepting the idea of their meaninglessness. So Wittgenstein later comes to mind. So Wittgenstein famously said that we can show something, but that what we're showing is meaningless. In this way, perhaps this has some meaning, and we can understand what is going on. But again, we're just dealing with the notion of showing. Or what I'm hoping for, to better understand and ultimately reject Carnap's criticism and any other further possible criticism. And at the end, it seems that there is a difference between the two. Metaphysics as a product is debatable, it is eliminable, but metaphysics as an activity, it is not. It doesn't seem so. And also, it seems that metaphysics per se is not impossible. So it seems simply that we cannot avoid the idea that metaphysics is not impossible. How so? So Jaskland claims the following: there would be no reason to ask how metaphysics is possible if we did not suspect that metaphysics might be impossible. So simply the idea of metaphysics being possible rests on the idea that it might be impossible, but I'm not sure that the function that we can even think of it as being impossible. So, and basically the argumentation that I offered so far brings us to the contrary conclusion: metaphysics is indispensable, ineliminable, and unavoidable. So, what then could, or what does the expression metaphysics is impossible mean? And I'm trying to think that it's a dubious one and it's an impossible one, impossible idea. Why? It simply seems that it is impossible for metaphysics to be impossible. How? Well, for example, can we even grasp what we mean when we say that metaphysics is impossible? The very act of grasping would be about a metaphysical something. It would involve some kind of metaphysical activity. Then, on one other hand, we say that metaphysics is impossible. What do we mean? That there is no reality? But that is impossible also. Even in imagining the impossibility of reality would be one possibility of how reality can be. So even if we somehow think that there is no reality, this is some kind of reality. It seems strange, but then does it mean that there are no entities that metaphysics deals with? So that in this sense, metaphysics is impossible. But even an empty universe or an empty reality is some kind of reality. So again, we're engaging in some act of metaphysical imagination, and we're dealing with some kind of metaphysics. I would even dare to say metaphysical product. So, and basically, it all comes down that the very act of imagining the impossibility of metaphysics is an act of metaphysical thinking, imagining, and therefore it renders the idea of metaphysics being impossible. And to finish, well, it seems that this whole argumentation seems a bit vague, perhaps even uninteresting. But it depicts something, an aspect of metaphysics and its unavoidability. We cannot confirm its existence, we cannot specify it, perhaps we cannot elucidate it, we can fight off the counter-arguments that are offered against our positive illustrations, but while we are doing that, we are doing metaphysics. So that's an important thing, we're practicing metaphysics, and therefore it is there. And furthermore, as I said before, it seems that we cannot even think, speak, or argue without venturing into the metaphysical domain. Therefore, metaphysics cannot be impossible. It's impossible for it to be impossible. It is indispensable, ineliminable, and unavoidable. And that's it. Thanks.
Wow, what a conclusion remark.
Yeah, it's like a bit strong.
Wow, questions, comments? Okay, David.
Yeah, so I agree with you, the unavoidability of metaphysics. Like, yeah, I have several questions. I'm gonna start with the use of the terms impossible and possible. This is just kind of an explanatory question. This is terms used in logic, in model logic usually. So things that are impossible logically are contradictions, things that are impossible metaphysically, I guess, are break natural laws or something like in physics. And possible are a little bit possible worlds and things like that. And what does it mean that like it is impossible to do this?
Thanks. It's an interesting question. I haven't thought about it. Yeah, I guess I would say that impossibility here is linked with something like what we can imagine or think or conceive. And
yeah, but there are things like, you know, round square. You cannot visualize it, but you are certainly imagining it. It's not that there is an empty content there. I mean, at least in logic, like things like, yeah, you can like put those things together and they're impossible object. You're not visualizing it actually. There's no content there, but there is propositional content and not perceptive content. Just as well.
I'm not sure that I can imagine a round circle to be a round square to be.
No. But I think when you say you cannot imagine it, that you're thinking about you cannot visualize.
Yeah, but one thing is to visualize, and it is okay to say okay, we cannot visualize that. We cannot.
Yeah, we can certainly not visualize it, but I think that it is consensus that you can imagine.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
You can grasp the concept.
Yeah, you can propositionally grasp the concept. Yeah.
But
yeah, so it's kind of just an explanatory question how it's used here. Like you can't like there is a impossibility of metaphysics. Like it's impossible to like yeah.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that, and I think this is something that is relevant. I would like to say that we should use it like, what can we imagine?
Yeah.
Not necessarily visualize.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm okay with you that, and this is what Descartes at the end also had that argument about what we can conceptually grasp does not mean that we can also visualize. And but so therefore visualization is not something that I would adopt as a prerequisite for possibility, but something like the I cannot say the possibility of imagination, but some kind of imagination would be something I would rely on. But thanks, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
It was Matija, I think.
Yeah, well, my idea would be that he employs some kind of notions that we usually employ in metaphysics. He is showing us something, and the very act of showing, or the very act of demonstrating or arguing, is by itself, at least in metaphysics, but we could say that for philosophy as well, it's a metaphysical or philosophical act. It's itself a metaphysical or philosophical activity, and we cannot eliminate that. I don't know. I have to say that it is not. So I think that at the end it comes down that we should be dealing with some kind of metaphysical activity, because we are talking about metaphysics. We are doing metaphysics. Well, this whole idea of mine is guided by this by one discussion that is so a long time ago in a blog where they were discussing something about free will, and it was a question whether this is a metaphysical discussion or not. And at the end, someone, I forgot who it was, I think Edith Nachmias, simply said, I will not enter into the discussion, but all I can state is that I'm seeing a lot of metaphysical activity being done. And this is the way I would like to bring forward the argument that I endorsed before. Yeah.
I'm afraid that this is Wittgenstein's answer, not Carnap's, but okay. Justin.
Okay, so it seems to me that when people criticize metaphysics or say we ought not to do metaphysics, the reasons that they might be relying on for that would be something like either our epistemic situation regarding metaphysics is very poor, or maybe some kind of inductive argument, like we've tried to do metaphysics, we haven't gotten anywhere. So either way, metaphysics is going to fail at its project of answering these fundamental questions. Now, if your argument works, you've shown us that those kinds of arguments are ineliminably metaphysical. But that seems like a very small victory, because the critics, the ones who are saying, yeah, we shouldn't bother with metaphysics, could say, okay, fine. Oh, you've got us. We got to do a little bit of metaphysics here. But the main point stands where metaphysics is going to fail for these other reasons.
I agree. And that's why I said at the end that perhaps it is shallow and vacuous, because it simply doesn't say that much, doesn't claim that much. And in a sense, I think that is true. So, but why it is true? Because the whole argument that I'm dealing with relies on metaphysical activity. And while what we want the resolution of the metaphysical content, we want to know whether, I don't know, realism is true, or whether there are universals and so on. But this is not what we are dealing here. We're not dealing with something. We're not trying to. How can I say? The problem that we haven't gotten anywhere is not the problem for such an argumentation, because just the activity of doing metaphysics, all the discussion that we are involved in is something that we can say it's ineliminable. Now, where does this help? I think it does when someone wants to say that metaphysics is meaningless. So we can say, look, it is not meaningless. We are doing it. There is some sense in it. So when we understand what we are doing, and in this manner, perhaps we can, as I said before, do these two things: reject Wittgenstein, perhaps, conclusion, and Carnap's criticism, and perhaps even give more elucidation to what the positive thinkers during Vienna Circus was about, and this is not trivial, I would say.
No, I agree, and I think the distinction you make between applying the distinction between product and activity is useful here, and I don't think the claim that metaphysics is meaningless gains traction unless we're positivist or something like that. But we have no good argument for being positivist, I think. But here's one further question I might push. What do you think about the distinction between metaphysics and meta-metaphysics? Do you take meta-metaphysics to be a species of metaphysics? I mean, it seems like you do, because one possible move people might make is like, no, we're just engaged in meta-metaphysics here. We're not actually doing metaphysics. Is that a distinction that in a way tracks the activity product thing?
I think yes. I think I should say something like that, right?
I mean, it suggests some similarities there, but I think the metaphysics in the room probably would be more better positioned to answer that, I think.
I think that we're getting back to the problem that everyone wants to offer a positive metaphysical claim about how the world is. So the metaphysician always try to expose some kind of theory about how the world is, to tell us about the inventory of the world and so on. And okay, that's fine, but that's something that we should do, of course. But then when someone says, look, okay, this hasn't been fruitful, this hasn't got us anywhere, we have these metaphysical problems that have been around for 3,000 years, and therefore metaphysics is meaningless. And then I say, no, it is not meaningless. This is how we could say it is not meaningless. And is this a metaphysical argument? Okay, I'm fine with that. This is not a problem. I don't think it is. Perhaps it is. Maybe I'm not aware how it could be a problem. But it seems that this is not a problem. We are simply doing metaphysics, or we are doing metaphysics as activity.
I mean, that sounds
Yeah.
So maybe continue along the lines of Justin. Generally, I think that these arguments that something is self-refuting, that they are sort of cheap victories. Say, well, relativism is self-refuting, therefore we can forget about it. Well, does it mean that it is self-refuting? That the statement every knowledge is relative is self-refuting because this is supposed to be the absolute claim. Okay, but assume that somebody writes a huge systematic book and shows successfully that perception is relative, ethics is relative, physics is relative, biology is all human knowledge. And then actually we should distinguish between a claim about our knowledge and meta-claim. So the claim that all knowledge is relative is actually meta-claim, and that is absolute claim. While on the first level, doing sciences and perception and ethics and whatever, what you have relativism. So if somebody succeeds in doing that, that will be a victory of relativism. So the argument that relativism is self-refuting would have no value because it's not self-refuting on the meta level. Well, you distinguish object level, meta level, and so on. So maybe that's along the line of what Justin wanted to say.
Yeah. I think that what you're saying then, and what could one say, is that what the relativist then, if he would succeed in such a thing, if he would be able to prove that everything is relative, then he would have a strong, substantial claim about how the world is. And he would offer a product, a metaphysical product. And
Okay.
and so, okay, then we have a solution about how the world is. Does it pose a problem for what I was saying and the idea that metaphysics is ineliminable? I would think that would just be in line with everything that has been said so far, because again, it seems that the idea that metaphysics is ineliminable, it's the best way to formulate this is to think about metaphysics as activity and not as product.
Yeah.
And what the relativist is offering is a final answer to the question of the product.
Yeah, that would be Wittgensteinian view between showing and saying. Okay, but let's go. I think that at slide number 28, you have a list of arguments. No, list, 2 arguments. And these are nice. I kind of like these arguments, but however, I will go to the beginning of your lecture. And there seems to be something new and fresh and interesting. We spoke several times about this, but I never noticed. It seems, the first couple of slides, it seems that the Lowell's argument is as following. What is metaphysics supposed to do? It's supposed to give us an overall picture, synoptic view, okay, of the world and our knowledge and so. And however, we have different sciences. We have biology, science, chemistry, sociology, whatever. And the point of metaphysics is to put these different sciences together. So actually, his argument seems interesting. As soon as you have more than one science, you have metaphysics. Or we can talk about different sciences, about mathematics, sociology, so on. And we can talk about these philosophical divisions between, say, fact and value, or physical and mental, or actual, potential, present, past, and so on. So as soon as we have different domains, realms, or sciences, we need metaphysics. As soon as we have more than one, because we want to have a single picture. So this seems interesting argument, interesting and strong. Actually, that is what logical positivists, they had
Unity of science.
that idea. Yeah, here is International Encyclopedia of Unified Science, original. So that's what that was what they wanted to do. So, though they believe that they are doing ultimately syntactical job, logical, syntactical, that the language, say, psychology and the world of physical and material objects, that's matter of semantics, that we will get a single picture by doing semantics. So, okay, but this is, I think, as far as I would say, it's new and interesting argument that as soon as you have more than one science, you have to have metaphysics in order to connect them into a single picture. So that's...
Yeah. I don't know what to add, to be honest. You said everything.
Well, he suggested that in his formulations, in first couple of slides.
Yeah, this is
this additional extra argument, new, fresh, good.
I don't know. Well, one could say, perhaps one could say, should metaphysics be an arena for resolving boundary issues? And that's what someone like a relativist would say. So you can try to neglect that.
No.
And then everything kicks in. The whole thing that I've been talking about simply kicks in. So it's kind of strange. This, I think.
Sorry. One more suggestion. When you are talking about relativism, also at the beginning, maybe first 5 or 10 slides, maybe you need. Maybe you're talking about something very in a slightly different sense. That relativism, you're maybe talking about different sciences being separated, being independent. Maybe you're talking about relativism in that sense. So some kind of separatedness of sciences. So you have psychology, you have physics. There is no need to bridge them, to connect them. You have concrete, abstract. There is no need to bridge to build a single picture. So when you talk about relativism, maybe partly you talk about usual relativism, epistemological relativism, something, but maybe partly you talk about the separatedness of sciences. And such a relativist, he would say, no, we don't need metaphysics because we are very happy to have different and independent sciences that have nothing to do with each other.
But isn't such an idea grounded on the idea that relativists want to put forward, that actually, and this is what I have highlighted here, that simply what reality is driven by our interpretation that is grounded in some kind of personal interest. So the personal interest in this idea of having two separate sciences will be that the scientists working within a science, let's call it science one, have one interest, and the scientists working in science two have another interest, and therefore they're driven by it and they do not have to talk to each other. Yeah. But if we want to compare the two, the only place where we can do it, it's in some kind of arena, and then we need metaphysics. Then
Yeah,
metaphysics.
it seems that Carnap is contradicting himself, so that would be kind of ad hominem argument against him. On the one hand, he's proponent of unified science. On the other hand, in empiricism, semantics, and ontology, says no, they're independent realms, domains, they have nothing in common.
And then he wants unified science. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I made several notes regarding Carnap and how to perhaps criticize his ideas. And one of the things that popped into my mind was exactly this: that how can we have a unified science if we are accepting a linguistic framework based on some kind of pragmatic interest? It seems that the pragmatic interest should be grounded in something that, and then we are no longer talking about.
Yeah. Sorry for taking so much time. Take a look here. Psychology, biology, mathematics, physics, semantics, everything in the one book. And that's the idea. Sir, it was David.
Yeah, I would just want to continue in this debate. I mean, your discussion now. So the way to separate the science, right? I mean, you can do it in a lot of different ways, right? I mean, you can do it by democratic consensus. You can just take physicists, biologists, and ask them, and then you can mark them. I think that this is actually the point for metaphysics, because metaphysics is actually concerned with so at least two things: on what is true, objectively, independently true, and what is written on the slide, the consistency, right? And this is what brings about that this debate about differentiation of science should be done in a metaphysical, in a mechanism of metaphysics, or however you want to call it, and not on any other project, things like that. This is just my thoughts.
I think it's interesting, at least I find it interesting in what have been talking now. It's simply that whenever we try to engage in a discussion between sciences or whatnot, not necessarily sciences, we're engaging in some kind of metaphysical discussion.
Yeah.
So we need it. It seems so. You need it because you need perhaps the language, perhaps you need the content, in a sense that we have to agree that, okay, this is a thing, this is not a thing. This is one way to go, or the other way to go is simply to say, okay, you are claiming that the world is such and such, and the other science is claiming that the world is such and such. Then to compare these two notions, we need an independent stance. And who can give such an independent stance? Well, metaphysics.
Yeah.
It seems kind of trivial, but I don't think that it is absolutely trivial. It's simply that what is not trivial. The thing that law calls the indivisibility of truth. So there is, like X-Files would say, the truth is out there. So
Yeah.
it would be some kind of idea.
Yeah. Can I just ask? I really like the idea of doing everyday metaphysics. I really agree with it. But can you elaborate on it further? Because it seems like the concept. Yeah, I always thought, yes, that metaphysics is that there are a lot of statements and beliefs that we have in everyday basis in practice that are actually quite heavily metaphysical without realizing, and that people who are not professional philosophers and metaphysicians engage in them.
Well, I think it is, perhaps it is trivial to say it, but in a way it could function like this. So we had the parking lot example. I think Bor and I were talking about it in his room, in his cabinet. Yeah, that's the word. But the idea is basically that, okay, you're talking about the parking lot. You're talking about how much space it occupies. You're already talking about some kind of metaphysical entity. Then you are claiming that there is a car in there. There is another entity. Then the second car comes in. Then they are separated, I don't know, by 2 meters. Then we're talking about relations between cars, and so a lot of metaphysical
presupposition
entities are simply used in such in everyday talk. So in this way, we can say that metaphysics is everywhere, and this is what at the end Lowe is saying in that quote that I used. So whether we like it or not, we're metaphysicians all the time because we constantly use some kind of metaphysical I will call it entity.
Yeah.
Apologies, Božić, but just to continue, I think I've been on these lectures, I've been already mentioning this. There is an example that is relevant for your claim here. That's in 1990s in Croatia, there was a debate. There was a group of physicists from Institute Ruđer Bošković, which is good, top institute, and group of Jesuits. And what was their point? These physicists, they were religious. And so these people, they were trying to show that religion is compatible with science. And actually, so there was in a public space this debate. So what were they claiming? Actually, they were claiming that there is no such thing as a single world and single truth. They were claiming that there is physical truth, there's religious truth, there's maybe psychological truth, or I don't know, truth in literature and so on, so that they are incompatible. So if during the week you are a physicist and Sunday morning you are a religious person in a church, you are not contradicting yourself because they are completely incompatible domains. And so they were relativists in your sense. So we need Lowe and his idea of there is a single world out there and there is a single truth. And these different sciences, including religion, theology, whatever, physics, they have to be ultimately compatible. You have to have ultimately single picture. So these guys, these Adalbert Rebić and others, they are your
my target
here. Yeah.
Well, but I would say there is so much that they share that it's
well, actually, that's the view that they accepted because they wanted to make it compatible. They in church they wanted to have top physicists in a Sunday morning. Sorry, Alexander Božić.
Wrong button. Yeah. So let me try to gather my thoughts. So is it not the case that the project of unified science was abandoned a long time ago because it proved not to be very fruitful? And regarding this, I'm wondering whether I understood correctly the proposed role which metaphysics should play in this arena between where different sciences could be where the relationship between different sciences could be addressed, because I cannot see what metaphysics can illuminate in the relationship, for example, between historiography and biology, or even biology and chemistry, except the viewpoint which is possibly today a matter of consensus that the different sciences are investigating, that reality is multifaceted, and different sciences are investigating separate levels or separate aspects of reality, and in most cases, or in all, the reduction is not feasible, even for example, biology to chemistry and so on. So I'm not sure about what exactly metaphysics provides here in this arena.
So it provides the idea that there is a fundamental truth that we all share. So that the truth is indivisible and that it's, like I said, out there. So this is the idea. Simply, okay, we have biology and physics, and they have different claims about something. Okay, it's not that metaphysics will offer a solution to their problem, but it will. But what metaphysics claims that there is simply something, a fundamental structure of reality that is indivisible, that it's ineliminable, that it's out there, and within which the discussion between these two sciences can start. Without it, the discussion couldn't even start. We would have something like what the relativists want, a closed discussion, a closed discourse in which one claims one thing, the other claims another thing, and we could not check for mutual consistency. So perhaps sometimes on some questions we cannot achieve mutual consistency. We cannot find an answer because different sciences are offering different solutions. But the idea is that if you want to talk about it, you need some place where to talk, and that's the arena of metaphysics. So in this sense, metaphysics is treated as how can I say it? The background of any discussion, and in a sense, we could equalize philosophy with metaphysics. So what I was wondering whether this argumentation could be offered to defend the idea of this indispensability and eliminability of philosophy. So because basically the structure is very, very similar, and that's it. So the fact that we are not achieving consistency, or that one science is claiming one thing and the other science is claiming another thing, and these two things are in contradiction, does not imply per se that there is no, or that there will be no resolution of this problem, I think at least. And on the other side, what we need metaphysics or something like that, that will help us to even start discussing.
Well, if I can help to Filip, this time the question that Božić asked, we have different sciences, so what they have in common? I don't know, forestry in Amazonas with stellar physics or whatever. The same question was discussed about 90 years ago by Carnap and Neurath. They had the same question. And they gave as examples some border cases, graphology and meteopathy. So graphology, that handwriting reflects human character, and meteopathy, the idea that weather influences human behavior. And they said, well, who knows? Maybe there is something there. Maybe there is nothing. Maybe there is no link. Maybe there is. Who knows? But we have to leave that possibility open. We just cannot exclude that possibility in advance. Who knows? Maybe weather influences human behavior. So we should work on it, research it. But those are where the cases where different sciences work together. So human behavior, behaviorism probably then, and meteorology, for instance. So that was their answer. We should not close that door. We have to leave that possibility open, and you never know. You can never tell in advance whether two apparently different and independent sciences will work together one day and bring to some results. That was their answer, Carnap and Neurath, 1930s. Mattia. Yes, yes.
Well, in that case, I think I would say that I would go to argues in a way, perhaps that like David and Sterleni do, that in order to formulate a linguistic framework at all, of any kind, you need some kind of metaphysics. So metaphysics comes first. You need to
That's
have,
David's slogan, metaphysics comes first.
yeah. So it seems that in that case we need I'm not sure if we need, well, sorry, let me reformulate. So it seems that if Carnap would go that way, and it seems that this is a reply that he could adopt. I think this is a good way to defend Carnap. But then perhaps we should use other arguments to say, okay, look, you are formulating a linguistic framework. Okay, nice. You're talking about, I don't know, things, numbers. You're talking about, I don't know, mobile phones, glasses, pens, 2 pens, 3 pens, and so on. Where do you get all this stuff? So, and then think the idea that you have to be in contact with some kind of reality that informs you about what there is, and this is a metaphysical claim. I'm not sure if this works, so I have my doubts about such an answer, because perhaps one can just hold the idea that language comes first, as perhaps Carnap would, and then I don't know what to say, but I think that this is the way one should go.
Well, if I may use my position, I have one more question somewhere at the end. It's slide number 30. You're saying something that well, we can't do without metaphysics, and that's a brute fact. Well, it sounds strange because you are giving arguments for this claim. So if you are giving arguments for something, then it's not a brute fact.
But metaphysics as activity is a brute fact. So, for example, this is, how can I say, perhaps in the Wittgensteinian lingo, you can say, okay, I'm showing you this. I am showing you the modus ponens. So there is nothing else I can, how can I explain it to you? Either you see it or not, I don't know. This is the way I would go. So simply, when we are discussing, we're doing metaphysical activity, when we are offering an argument, when we are discussing, when we are putting forward the criticism. So it is, the criticism may have different contents, of course, and we may adopt different contents, but just the act of putting forward the criticism is based, it seems like you cannot analyze it any further. I don't know if I've been clear, but this is like where I would like to go.
But you are arguing, say, the assumption that you can or should get rid of metaphysics is self-refuting. Therefore, you cannot get rid of metaphysics. And then you say it's a brute fact. Hey, come on. Maybe if you are offering an argument, then it's not a brute fact. Maybe you need different kind of examples to argue that it's a brute fact. I'm thinking about examples. There's a alibi. Guy is not a murderer because at the time of murder, he was in other town. So here the assumption is metaphysical principle that he cannot be at two places at the same time. So maybe you can use such examples to show that metaphysics is brute fact, not self-refuting or Carnap or Wittgenstein.
I would, the idea is that I would like to argue against Carnap in a way, and against any criticism of metaphysics in a way.
There is obvious way to argue against Carnap in empiricism. There is an obvious way of arguing against Carnap in empiricism, semantics, ontology, and that is, come on, we need a single framework that will embrace all different frameworks together. That's what you wanted to do in a Unity of Science project.
Yeah, that was Matti I was talking about. Yeah. No, I agree, but sorry, I lost my thought. But what I was saying is that I would like to argue against Carnap not by questioning the content of his theory, by saying, look, you got it wrong, or saying, look, the analytic synthetic distinction does not hold, or whatever, but rather by using this method of okay, we can differentiate between two kinds of doing metaphysics or thinking about metaphysics, and if we can do that, then the other way of thinking about metaphysics as activity, makes sense, and therefore your claim that metaphysics doesn't make sense is false.
Personally, I don't like that kind of argument. You can hear it very often in meaning of life discussion. The meaning of life, you cannot find it, but the meaning of life consists in looking for it, in search. So as long as you are searching for the meaning of life, your life is meaningful, but you will never find the meaning of life. I think that is self-refuting. Well, if you cannot achieve your end, then your activity is pointless. So I would not go into that direction.
Yeah.
So we are out of time. I've been criticized that I'm as a chairman too. Are there any more questions, comments, suggestions? Andre.
Yes, just one brief question. I mean, I was wondering if the sole purpose of metaphysics is really to measure the consistency between separate sciences. I mean, isn't logic enough for that task? I mean, do we need metaphysics for that?
Yes, because we need the fundamental reality. That would be the answer. Because we need we need a fundamental reality, because if we want to talk about if we want to measure consistency between different sciences, then we need something with which we will measure it. So what could that be? That needs to be a fundamental something, fundamental reality.
I mean, do we really need anything like that, like something third to measure separate sciences with? I mean, cannot we just compare them and say if they're mutually consistent or not? I mean,
I don't know. I think that you need. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think that you have to presuppose that there is something out there. So if you want to aim at the truth, if you want just to have consistency without truth, then that is another thing. But I'm not sure if this is a good answer.
The question is whether we are looking for pure consistency or maybe more than that.
well, I'm not sure what
Statements of physics or common sense objects, and you have statements about mental states. Well, logically, they are consistent. There is no contradiction between them, but you want more than consistency. You want some explanation, some links, and maybe we need more than, we want more than pure logical consistency, and for that reason logic is not enough. We have mind-body problem. Oh, well, isn't logic enough? Well, it seems that it's not.
I mean, yes, I can understand that answer, but
value problem, is logic enough? Wow.
Yeah. But is that really what Jonathan Lowe had in mind when he is speaking about the indivisibility of truth? And
I don't know.
Because, I mean, those citations on the slides were simply pointing at measuring consistency and nothing else, and speaking about a single notion of truth. I mean, you can achieve that with logic alone, it seems to me.
So this is one of his answers. So the idea is simply that you want to have some kind of consistency between various truths. There has to be a truth with which these truths can be consistent with. So,
I mean, there's no mention of objective reality. There's no mention of potential reduction of one science to the other and things like that.
Well, he does ask. He starts with the idea of here it is. The subject matter of special sciences, biology, psychology, economics can be properly said to be subsumed under that or another, and so on. So we have this idea that there is something we're talking about. It's not just logical consistency. There is more in here. So I'd say that he's taking for granted that I think so, but you are right. That one should emphasize that I think he's taking for granted that there is something that we are dealing with, some kind of content. But what is doing the work to grant us that metaphysics is ineliminable is not so much the content as much as that we are doing metaphysics. Yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I don't think that he would go so far. I'm surely not, because at the end he's offering positive answers to what there is. So there is some content that at the end he wants to have. I don't think that but this is I think what questioning is a good question. Can we check for mutual consistency without thinking about the truth? whether that thing is true or not. Logically, we can have a coherent system without having appeals to what actually is out there, and we might completely have a system that is consistent without it being true, and that could happen. But I think that what actually we are dealing here with is what actually various sciences are offering us. So that's a starting point. Maybe I should have highlighted that.
Oh, yeah, and just another remark, which is really relying on what Justin said previously. I mean, I think that you have to argue that doing metaphysics is really doing just another bit of metaphysics or some more metaphysics, because if the main argument is really that that metaphysics is unavoidable because by arguing against it, you're still engaging in an activity which is metaphysical. Well, you're not. You're arguing about metaphysics, and you're engaged in a metaphysical activity. So, of course, you can say that metaphysics is just another piece of metaphysics and just some more metaphysics. But I mean, that's not obvious. So it seems that the burden is on you to argue that it is the case.
Okay, thanks. No, I have to think of that. I haven't at all thought about that. Yeah, thanks. And I don't know what to say. I think that the answer that I gave you before is simply that the one that you repeated, that okay, metaphysics is just part of metaphysics. Yeah, it's just one way to think about metaphysics.
Okay, we are out of time. Thanks, Filip. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks everybody for the input here. It's been great. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.